It's probably a good time for me to say this, and I'd like your view on this, Jon, because we've been saying a lot of things about profit and potentially coming across as being negative against profit. And I want to address that and say that profits are not in themselves evil. In fact, profits help fuel the very impact that we're talking about. So this isn't an anti-profit thing. It's about using those profits for the right reason, not just an inflated bank balance, but using the fuel then to create even more impact. What's your reflection on that, Jon?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, profit is not a dirty word. It's not, maybe greed is probably is, but profit isn't. And there's a difference, right? Yes, just as you point out, profit, enables you to invest in a longer term vision that's going to be healthy for the company. That can be in new products, new solutions, new technologies, new innovations. It can also be in employee well-being. It can be in education programs to develop people. There's other ways, to invest than, you need some investments in some sense around the different stakeholders that are important to your business. And so the only thing that's going to make those investments are your profits. And by making those investments across those different dimensions, hopefully your profit will just get healthier, so they can make even more investments then to keep the company a place where people want to stay, work, and contribute to. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there shouldn't be too much debate around the role of profit in a business. Growth, you can have a little bit more of a debate. Is it growth at all costs? Is it growth at what, determining what is the right growth rate of a company from a revenue perspective. But profit is a necessity to make everything else work.
That's the ultimate desire, I think. It's the virtuous cycle. Profit fueling impact, impact fueling profit, profit fueling impact. And if we can keep that cycle going, that's when we've got a healthy society and a healthy economy all at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
We speak a lot about business leaders being faced with moral dilemmas, whereas you speak in some of your writing, you speak about having moral courage, or sometimes you even infer to moral obligation. What does moral courage mean to you?
Yeah, I think to me, it really means that when faced with certain tensions within a business or within life, that they're resolved by looking at certain virtues or, again, morality, in the sense that what's going to be the best decision for as many as possible in that element. So that, there's definitely some tension that's going on that needs to be resolved, and there's probably, in most likely cases, some easier decisions to make, but they may not be the best decisions even definitely probably not in the long term, but maybe not even in the short term. It may just kind of hope, you might kind of duck to make sure, maybe with the hope that it passes, but the reality is it's not going to. So, you need to make those tough decisions in resolving those tensions. And, it is going to take a certain amount of moral courage to do that. It's going to take moral courage to understand the two differing values and exploring those with those involved to really try to understand the different positions. And then it's going to, take the effort to kind of discern, what's going to be the best decision based on those differing values. Is there a way, if at all possible, to kind of honor both values? I mean, you can't do it necessarily equally, but is there a way still to honor the other side of that tension-filled issue? But resolving it that may lead one way than the other in that specific decision. And I think some of my research, I guess, will kind of give more insights into this as I go. But to me, it kind of seems like at certain times, if you're taking those two different tensions and resolving them and maybe honoring one value a little bit more than the other, Maybe next time a similar issue comes around, it makes sense to go the other way as far as honoring that other value and then resolving that secondary tension. So I think, to me, kind of the point is that um, it is that approach of resolving those tensions and figuring out how to do that in a way that is not just self-interest filled, but looking at it from, like I said, kind of honoring both values, but in working with the different groups that are representing those differing values to try to figure out the best way forward in honoring both as much as possible. I
I
don't
think
know, does that make sense or?
it does. And if I can kind of summarize it a little bit, leaders are faced with challenging decisions on a day-to-day basis, and it does become an element of balancing multiple elements. But I think having that moral compass and staying true to your values and beliefs and having that North Star as to what your purpose is, and thinking about impact. Yeah, and you may have to make some challenging decisions that trades off one factor over another, but over a longer period of time, make sure those things are in balance.
Yeah, and I think, maybe a kind of an example of this that may help, I guess, is that so Dick's Sporting Goods is a sporting goods retailing company here, and um, they sold guns, right? And a number of years ago, after the shootings that were at the Parkland High School, the CEO of Dick's Sporting Goods was like kind of came to a reckoning. Do we continue to sell guns and keep the minimum levels of who we sell guns to, or do we step up and try to make a difference? And so one of their first actions was that they raised the age to 21 as far as who they would sell guns to, and then they stopped selling automatic rifles as well. They lost some employees because of that. They've probably lost some customers because of that. And I think now today, I don't think they sell guns at all in their stores. It was a tough decision, right? It was kind of resolving that social and economic tension of do we sell guns or not, and who do we sell them to? Fortunately, I'm sure there was, analysis done and so on, as part of this decision that made, but, longer term, they did win financially as well, kind of in that move because they start carrying other types of goods that maybe are more profitable, more growth within it. And they seem to, be able to definitely take the hit, if you will, and making that decision and feeling it financially and through some stakeholders. But over the long term, it seemed like it ended up being a good financial decision too. Um, so, there is a balance, just like there is with stakeholders, right? Between trying to, you can't just favor one over the other, but there may be times where you have to make those tough trade-offs, and it may take a short-term impact on you financially within your company. But if it's the right decision, then things will correct, and you'll probably be better off than you were during that challenging point in time.
Yeah, that's a great example, John. Thanks for sharing that. That one gives us a lot to think about. And it's a good example of exactly those moral decisions that CEOs sometimes need to make. We've spoken a lot about senior leadership, executive leadership, CEO activism so far. We touched earlier about employees. Tell me more about your thoughts on the role of employee activism.
Yeah, I think it's a positive thing. I mean, I think there's a couple of things. One is I think accountability, again, going back to governance. It is more than just the board of directors. Customers and employees in particular can hold executives accountable for their actions or inactions on different issues. I mean, we've seen it from issues of sexual harassment with like Google. We've seen it with the use of selling artificial intelligence to the military with Microsoft, Amazon, and others. We've seen it with immigration issues as well. So, I think it opens the conversation. And it's an important accountability check that business leaders need to be more active in. I believe that, employees should be given a seat on the board of directors, just like it happens in Germany. I think business leaders need to step up to that and really build that in as part of their governance structure as well. And I think the other thing that's kind of missing, I guess, from a business leadership perspective, um, you can't spend company time, obviously, solving every issue under the sun. But if there's issues that are resonating front and center within a society, whether it's during lunchtime or after hours or however the business wants to do it, having an open conversation around some of the tough issues that countries or states are facing is a productive thing. It's not to change anybody's mind one way or the other, but I think it's to present and discuss the different views so that people kind of leave that conversation better informed, better insights, maybe a little bit more empathy. Again, the point is not to change their minds, but it's really to make them, hopefully guide them to, understand the issue a little bit more, become better citizens, which, I think again flows back to the company and how they feel about that organization, but also in their own personal and family life as well.
Yeah, I think open dialogue is always something to be encouraged. Some of the tricky ground can be some of the more emotive territory, where you might end up in a situation where people are taking emotional stands instead of just being open-minded and willing to listen to the others. But I think as a general rule, having open dialogue is a very positive thing. Diversity of
Yeah.
thought. Okay, when we talk about employees, is something about our audience is that we have leaders from all walks of life listen to the show. Some of them are CEOs, some of them are senior managers, some of them are middle managers. Many of them are new leaders, like so they've graduated from being individual contributors to being a team leader for the first time and basically progressing on their career. Any advice that you could give to a leader who might be somewhere on that ladder and they see the company diverting away from their values, beliefs, and vision? What should a leader do in that situation? Keep in mind that they're also taking care of the people in their team. They probably are passionate about the company they work for. If they do see a deviation from purpose, a deviation from values and beliefs, what is your advice?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. One is that, I think having conversations with the leaders that you report up into, to have raise those concerns, have that conversation, hopefully they would be open to that and they would, begin to look at how to make some positive changes to address some of those concerns. I think if that doesn't, kind of resolve in a, reasonable way, then I think, taking the action that we've seen, whether it's, petitions being signed by employees calling on their business leaders to make the change, or, if it gets to the point where it has to result in a protest, then I think that's all, on the table. It's tough, obviously, if you're an individual contributor leader, or, financial decisions come into play on that too, right? And in some business courses, at least when I was going through, they always talked about having enough money to walk away, so that if you came across an ethical situation within a company, and that it couldn't be resolved in an ethical way, that you weren't going to get it pulled into it or be a part of it, that you had the financial um, base anyway to be able to walk away from it and find a better company that would make better ethical decisions. Again, I know that's tough too, to build that kind of financial equity to be able to do that, but I think it's an important, element within this conversation that people need to think about. I think part of it too is, I think, as an individual leader, you need to think about, what are the values that are important to you? What is your leadership philosophy? And, thinking through maybe some of those scenarios of possibilities where words don't match actions or actions don't match words. That, what are you going to do when those types of situations arise? And so I think thinking a little bit longer term as an individual leader is important, just as it is for a business leader. And so I think that helps, I think, set your compass, but also it may lead you to make, some financial decisions that give you that flexibility to walk away if you need to.
Really interesting perspective, John. I'm going to give a little forecast here and I want you to challenge me on it and see what you think. So we've had generations of people where there has been low levels of engagement in the workplace, but potentially generations of people that didn't have a lot of choice. They had mortgages to pay, bills to pay, families to feed, etc. So they potentially end up in jobs that are not a perfect fit to their own values, beliefs, and purpose. But they have to stick with it until they can find something better because of the obligations that they've got in their personal life. I mentioned before that with millennials and Gen Z in Australia, but Gen Z for Americans, that they are more purposeful. They are looking for more direction focused organizations, ones that are making a real impact. But the other thing is they're not as materialistic.
Right.
They're not buying cars. They're not buying houses to the same extent that the generations did before. So they may be in a better position to be more free-willed. And if they end up in an organization where they join them for a purpose and find that that purpose doesn't match what they originally thought it was, that it's probably not as hard for them to leave as it was for the previous generations that had large mortgages to pay. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think, yeah, but again, if you read the statistics and so on, you're exactly right. I mean, it's more about the experiences. I think whether that's in life or work, that is the focus versus material things. And so hopefully that leads to, some greater, financial savings to build those cushions. I think there's, kind of along with that, at least from some of the statistics I remember, I mean, I think there's, even more of a desire for the younger generations to retire early. I know, in my opinion, retire is kind of an old term that's, that needs to be put away because it's retirement like we maybe our parents or grandparents knew it, isn't really relevant, I think, in today's world. But but I hope that translates to, good financial decisions that enable them to, live the type of purposeful life that they want to. It's tough to do. I mean, and as you point out, not every segment of society is going to be able to do that, but hopefully, with better employment practices and other things that, we provide a better base for more people than there is today. And I think, part of it, not again one of these tangents, I guess, but I wish there was more focus on in high schools in particular, and even in college, on personal finance, so that there's better awareness of good financial decisions that individuals and families need to think about. I think the earlier education on that, obviously, parents can play a role in that too, no doubt. But I think the school systems can definitely contribute to that, which hopefully then would provide an opportunity for more people to build that financial base, so that if they are confronted with an ethical disconnect or a purpose disconnect, that they have some cushion to be able to find another opportunity that is a better fit.
That's really interesting. I was just listening to Robert Kiyosaki the other day. He was on Chandler Bolt's podcast, and he was talking about this. So my view is I'm disappointed in the lack of education about leadership in our university systems. And it's interesting what I heard you say before about the course that you're starting. I think that's wonderful. So one of my things has been, why aren't we teaching leadership in the school system? And Robert's one was, well, we don't teach financial acumen either in the school system. We teach domain skills. We don't teach so many life skills. And leadership is a life skill. Looking after your personal finances is a life skill. And I think that's something for us all to think about.
Right.
That's probably a nice point for us to come towards a close, Jon. And I'm going to go with some rapid fire questions here to bring us to a close. The first one, can you tell us of a leadership book that has changed your life? What's your favorite leadership book and how did it impact you?
Boy, that's a I think one I would mention is it's called Integrity by Dr. Henry Cloud. And for me, it came as a good book to, when you are faced with some of these ethical dilemmas, it really put the focus on what kind of wake you're leaving in your life and thinking about it more in longer terms. And so anyway, Integrity by Dr. Henry Cloud would be a book I would recommend.
Okay, nice one. Do you have a favorite quote?
Boy, that's a good question too. I mean, I'm horrible at those types of things, like remembering songs or quotes or whatever. But here's a simple one that definitely resonates with me: is that if you can, you ought, which goes to Immanuel Kant and talking about ethics and making those types of decisions.
Very good. And can you think of a inspirational leader that you always think of that kind of forges who you are today?
Yeah, there's two. I'll do a historical one, I guess, and maybe a current one. One is Theodore Roosevelt. I've always been somebody I've read a lot about. No leader's perfect, but he really kind of embodied, I think, the spirit of a leader, and trying to engage different groups and really try to change things. Very progressive, thinking about the environment, thinking about the global society, not just the local. So I think, just that perspective and how he led, to me, is inspiring. A business leader that inspires. I think is kind of a good example of some of the CEO activism is Mark Benioff with Salesforce. I mean, he's being able to successfully grow a company, a profitable company, but also at the same time, really try to build a culture that gives back, and also take on tough issues in society, and not is unafraid to raise his voice to try to prevent policies that are discriminatory.
Okay, very good. Challenging one. Based on what you know about the Leadership Project and our vision and mission, who do you think we should interview next?
Mark Benioff.
All right, very good. Okay. So a question that we ask all of our guests, Jon, what's the one thing that you know now that you wish you knew when you were 20?
Yeah, I think part of it is that is thinking about the long haul. I think especially in your 20s, you can get a little, or at least I was, kind of impatient sometimes on things, or wanting to have more of an impact earlier on, and those types of things. But I think it's important to have more of a longer perspective on how things evolve. I mean, just like I talked about, it wasn't until 15 years ago or so I started thinking my life in chapters, and I think that's an important thing to do. I wish I would have been thinking more about that back in my 20s, and knowing that there's maybe a certain transition or transformational points in life that may make sense to do, that I'm not going to be on just the same track that I think I'm on in my 20s.
Nice advice. I really appreciate that, Jon. And final question. If any of our audience would like to get in contact with you and learn more about what you do, how do they find you?
Yeah, the best place is my website. It's jonmertz.com, JONMERTZ.com. I'm also on Twitter, same, just at Jon Mertz as well. So those are probably the two best places.
Excellent. And we're going to put those details in the show notes for anyone that's looking for the easy path of just clicking it so that you make sure that you get the addresses correct. So thank you so much, Jon. This has been an amazing conversation. I love talking about this topic. It's one that's near and dear to my heart. I loved hearing your perspectives. I learned a lot, and I know that our audience will as well. So thank you so much for being with us today.
I really appreciate, Mick, the time and the questions, and really am grateful that you are doing what you're doing in the world to build better leaders. So thank you for all your good work.
Thank you very much, Jon.